There are a number of very special friends with us this evening that I do want to take an opportunity to recognize very briefly. One of my former colleagues in the State Department, Walter Carrington, who served our country ably as our ambassador to Nigeria, is here with us. Walter, will you stand and give him a round of applause? One of the real pillars of this community, both the city of Boston and the BU community, is with us this evening. The publisher and editor of the Bay State Banner, Melvin Miller. Melvin. One of our distinguished members of the faculty, and he also is a member of the APARC Advisory Board, Dr. James Pritchett. Jim, would you stand? And I would also like to recognize Doug Sears, who is the Associate Provost for Boston University. Doug, would you stand and wave your hand? Thank you. I would like His Excellency Antonio Macarenas Monteiro to prepare to come to the podium to extend an official welcome. I know that there were a number of you who were here for his inaugural lecture as the 5th Balfour African President in Residence. We've been extremely pleased with his work during his tenure. He has represented Boston University well, the continent of Africa, and the country of Cape Verde. One of the things that I'm both happy about, but a bit chagrined, is that we have worked him more than overtime. In the very brief time that he's been here, he's been to Atlanta to represent us at Morehouse College, the alma mater of one of BU's most distinguished alumni, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., at the inauguration of the Chancellor of Elizabeth City State University in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Just last week, he was out at the home of the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooten. He was out at UCLA in California, and we've got an even more extensive itinerary for him. But I'd like to ask him now if he would come up and on behalf of APARC extend a welcome to all of you this evening.
I would like to thank you, Ambassador Stith, for your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to join all you this evening. Before I continue, allow me to recognize APARC's first lecturer in its forum on U.S.-Africa relations, the Honorable Senator Sam Brownback. We all welcome you and look forward to hearing your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be part of this innovative event this evening as APARC's 5th Balfour African President in Residence. I would like to commend Ambassador Charles Stith for his vision and work to create the President in Residence program, which is a forum for former African heads of state to engage Americans and enable them to have a better understanding of Africa. I look forward to the last couple of months of my term, during which I plan on continuing to lead discussions and sharing insight from my experience as the former president of an African country and, above all else, a citizen of one. It was only a month ago when, on this very podium, that I delivered my inaugural address as a park's president in residence, a speech entitled "The Obstacles of Leadership and Perspective of Future." With the world being divided along the lines of religion, political ideologies, and economic disparity, leadership near and far have, without a doubt, faced roadblocks to the preservation of their people's freedom, civility, and well-being. It is evident that leadership in the United States has indeed been facing a very difficult obstacle: terrorism. In the aftermath of 2006 elections, it's clear that Americans increasingly appreciate that the war against terrorism is more complex than what happened in Iraq. Africa's importance relative to the United States' national security interests have only increased. Allow me to explain. It is projected that by 2010, the United States will import 25% of its oil from Africa. 89% of African countries have substantial Muslim populations. The United States has a positive and productive relationship with most of these countries. Having said that, there continue to be flashpoints of conflicts on the continent where there are clear connections with radical Islamic elements. It's clear that there needs to be a renewed relationship between the two continents, one that consists of solidarity, responsible decision-making, accountability, and peaceful coexistence. However, before we achieve these goals, we must first achieve understanding. Understanding can only come from discussion, the sharing of ideas. The African Presidential Archives and Research Center's Leadership Lecture Series provides an environment for such discussion. Allow me now to ask Ambassador Stis to return to the podium to present tonight's honored guest and the presenter. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Let me add my voice to President Monteiro's in welcoming you all to this evening's program. As advertised, this evening's speaker is from Kansas. Having grown up next door in Missouri, I have more than a passing familiarity with the state. I also have the distinction of having attended college in Kansas. I went to Baker University in Baldwin City. A classmate of mine was a young woman by the name of Cheryl Brown, now Cheryl Henderson Brown. Her father, the Reverend Oliver Brown, initiated the landmark Brown v. Topeka case, precipitating the desegregation of public education in America. Cheryl Henderson Brown supports Sam Brownback. A couple of years ago, I had the honor of giving the Oliver Brown lecture at Washburn University in Topeka. I say all that to say that I know Kansas. Kansas is a place where people put a premium on core values. Character matters. Common sense is prized. This evening's speaker personifies the best that Kansas stands for. Also typical of what you'd expect from a leader from Kansas is that this evening's speaker is not afraid or reluctant to deal with difficult and challenging issues. There's no more difficult or challenging issue facing America than terrorism and national security. In 1998, I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate to serve as the United States ambassador to the United Republic of Tanzania, 1 month before al-Qaeda bombed our embassy in Dar es Salaam. I was posted to Tanzania 1 month after the bombing. Since then, I have followed intensely the growth and destructive capabilities of al-Qaeda. That Africa was one of the earlier theaters of al-Qaeda's war against America is noteworthy. That America will increasingly rely on African oil makes Africa of increasing economic as well as strategic importance. To protect America's strategic and economic interest in an age of terror requires a more comprehensive response than police or military actions. Few are more qualified to talk about the broad range of issues and strategies to prosecute such a comprehensive war on terrorism than this Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. Certainly, his experience on the Senate Judiciary Committee, his work on the Helsinki Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, as well as his leadership as co-chair of the Senate Human Rights Caucus, provides him the sort of perspective to offer a comprehensive and compelling vision of an America meaningfully engaged in the world. When it comes to Africa in particular, he has been in the forefront of trying to stop the genocide in Darfur and looking at ways to incentivize drug companies to find cures for neglected diseases throughout the world. We are honored and pleased to present this evening's leadership lecturer, the United States Senator and Republican presidential hopeful, the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Kansas, the Honorable Sam Brownback.
That's a nice wind-up. That's a nice wind-up, and the pitch. I'm impressed that you're here tonight, given what else is going on in the country. Little baseball game in Cleveland. I don't know, when do I have to be off? I got to make sure so that I don't lose all the crowd here. We're going to. Sorry, I didn't mean to tell it that way to you, but it was a few years back. Kansas was playing Oklahoma for the NCAA basketball championship. I think this was like 1988. Great KU team. Paul Pierce wasn't on that one that's on now for the Celtics, but I remember I had a speech to give in central Kansas on that evening, and I was to go on just as the game was tipping off. And if any of you guys follow anything about my state, basketball is serious. This is something you just don't mess around with. And so I went up to give my speech, and I said, okay, I got the long version or the short version. Which would you like? Crowd yells, short, short. And I gave that speech in probably 5 minutes to thunderous applause. Thunderous applause, because I was done in 5, and they were out the door, and they were watching the basketball game. So I'll try to be respectful of time, but I do have some things I want to talk about tonight. Ambassador, thank you very much for the very kind introduction and the asking me to speak here on such an important topic. His Excellency, thank you very much for honoring us in this country with your presence here and teaching us about Africa. I appreciate that greatly, and we've got ambassadors over here as well. We've already had some discussions earlier with, and thank you very much as well for the thoughts that you put forward. I love Africa. I love the people in Africa. I've been there 4 times to different places. It doesn't remind me anything of Kansas, and if you want to tell the old Dorothy jokes about just click your heels or we're not in Kansas anymore, I agree. I'm not here and I'm not in that place either. But it is a key moment in Africa, and the point that I want to drive home to you tonight is that we're at a moment, I think, for Africa. And there are a set of historic factors that are coming together right now for us to be able to drive this on forward and for things to be able to happen. And I want to quote an eminent Africa scholar that was in my office 3 weeks ago to talk about and to drive one particular point on the security issue and then build out from that. His name's Bono. Was in my office. You got to be pretty cool to be a one-name person anymore. I don't even know if he's got another name, or he doesn't need one anyway, but is a wonderful Africa hand. And we were talking about some of the issues that were going on. I've worked on a number of these issues. But he made the point that one of our military commanders he had recently met with, and the military commander was saying to him that we can't put enough ships around in the ocean or have enough planes to be able to address all the security problems that are evolving in Africa if we're not integrated in the African continent and working with people. It's not the sort of thing you can kind of build a military apparatus around and say, okay, we're going to be able to contain this escalation of what's taking place. You've got to be engaged and you've got to be involved, because you're not going to be able to solve it or handle it another way. And I thought that just seemed to me to be a common sense approach, a very Kansas approach, if you will, that we need to be engaged and we need to be involved. There's also a parable that I want to tell you about that's always haunted me, somewhat about Africa. It doesn't reflect all of Africa. There's a lot going on that's very good in Africa. There's a lot of growing economies. There's a lot of stability of government that's happening there. There's also a lot of humanitarian problems that exist on that continent. And I've been in the Congo, and I've been in Darfur, and I've been in southern Sudan, and I've been in Rwanda, and I've been to a number of these places, northern Uganda, and I've seen child soldiers, and I've seen women that have been molested as a part of battles or have been trafficked, and you get to see all of that, and there's a huge amount of suffering. But every time I go, I see a spirit of people that are there that just invigorates me. And yet you see the beauty of people even dealing with the suffering and the struggling that calls you on back and says, we can do something together, working together here, and it'll be good for all of us. It'll be good for us and it'll be good for them. And we'll both grow. And off of that, I want to read you this parable. It's an old religious parable, but I want to give it to you, and it haunts me about Africa. It goes like this. There was a rich man. He was clothed in fine linen, and he ate well every day. And outside his gate there was a beggar named Lazarus, who was full of sores, and wished to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. The dogs even came and licked his sores. Now when the beggar died, he was carried by the angels up to Abraham's bosom. But when the rich man died, he found himself in hell. He lifted up his eyes in torment, saw Abraham far off and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he's comforted, and you're tormented. And besides all this, between you and us, there's a great gulf, so that no one can pass from here to you and from you to us. The reason I read that, and the reason I'm so touched by that, is that if you look at that story, who is Lazarus and who is the rich man in that story if you put it in the modern parable of today? And you set us where we are now. We live in a very strong and very powerful country. We have many things. Not everybody. People struggle in the United States still. And we need to do better here. But when you travel and you see the situation in Darfur, you see what's happening in eastern or western Congo, or eastern Congo, when you see what's happening in northern Uganda, you see people struggling there and just wanting simply a little bit of help. And if we just simply engage them, they can save our souls. And in the process, we're going to grow and we're going to help them. And so my point that I want to drive home to you tonight is to just do it. Just get involved, just get engaged, just do it, just help out in Africa. You'll be better off, you'll be different, we'll be better off as a country, we'll be different, and together we're going to grow and prosper. But if we don't, if we ignore the situation, if we just say it's too difficult or it's just about humanitarian issues and it's not about the vital and strategic interests of the United States, and we say we're going to stay removed or we're just going to stay focused on the Middle East or on other industrialized countries that can help us more economically, we're going to lose. And we're going to have problems, and they're not going to do as well, and we're all going to struggle. I think there is a mutual interest and reason for us to get involved in the situation in Africa today. You heard about the oil, and I look at that, and that's there. I see it as almost kind of a crass piece of it. To me, I see people in Africa, and I see them struggling. And I see us being able to engage them and us being able to grow together in this process. Yes, there are resources that are involved. But what I see is people. And I just want to urge you to go. And I want to urge you to be involved in Africa. And I want to urge you to be involved in this fight. The good news is Africa's moment is arriving. That I say from a number of different factors. We have an amazing left and right coalition that's ready to come together in this country to work with Africa. People from the left traditionally involved and interested in Africa. People from the right becoming more and more engaged and interested. And I've had the most success on anything that I've done in Congress by building coalitions from the left and right. And getting people to come together. And this coalition sits and is ready to move forward, and it sits for us to be able to make and to take advantage of. If we won't be too judgmental or too dismissive of each other, we can do this, and we can work together on this moment. And I've worked with some strange coalitions before. Paul Wellstone and I, the former senator out of Minnesota, worked together to deal with the first human trafficking bill. We had a coalition that had in it Gloria Steinem and Chuck Colson. Together in the same coalition. Pretty good, huh? If you can do that. We would go down the hallway, and when people would tell them about our bill and that we had these two involved in it, they'd sign up without even knowing what was in the bill. Just saying, well, if you guys can get them together, I'm for it. We can do that. We can have that sort of coalition with this bill and with this effort on Africa because of mutual interests that are coming together from both sides. There is now a growing vital and strategic component. For many years, we've looked at Africa as strictly a humanitarian issue, saying, okay, this is an area, there's a lot of people struggling, we want to deal with it from a humanitarian perspective. And that's good, but it'll only take you so far. We need to get the vital and strategic and the economic interest involved in this as well, and then that's how you can build the Africa moment on out. And that is increasingly happening. As we're seeing really militant Islamists get involved in many more countries in Africa, as we're seeing interest from China getting involved much more on economic resourcing of materials taking place in Africa, you have now more of a growing vital and strategic interest taking place in Africa. So the humanitarian with the vital and strategic and a growing economic basis are things that we can see coming together, and they're coming together for this moment for Africa, so that we can put all those together and push Africa to the top of the agenda. I've been involved in foreign policy issues for some period of time. And I can tell you, it is a lot easier to do something on a foreign policy agenda while it's still forming and when it's starting to move forward than after it's already set and stabilized. I worked in Central Asia that after it peeled off from the Soviet Union. And it was a moment where, which is this region going to go? Is it going to go back into the Russian sphere? Is it going to go into a militant Islamic sphere? Which way is it going to go? And we wanted it to move out on an east-west axis and was able to put together a bill, Silk Road Strategy Act, and work with the region. And it's just much easier to work with a place before it's stabilized into going one way or another. Africa is at that moment now. It's a place where we can work to move and to help things. And it's going to stabilize one way or the other. It's going to go left or right. It's going to go into a particular area, and we can be involved, or we can stand back. It's much better from a foreign policy perspective to be involved as it's taking shape rather than after it's already taken shape. And now's the time for us to do that. I want to speak to the students here now to ask them to do something. And I mentioned this at the outset, and I want to develop this point some more. I want to urge you to just go. Just go to Africa. I urge people to take impact trips. Where instead of going, somewhere in the United States or to a nice beach for a spring break or for the summer time period, go to Africa. Go to Rwanda. Go to Congo. Work with a group that's drilling water wells. It'll be more expensive getting there, but once you're there, it's very cheap. So, you won't have all these sort of things that you're spending on vacations here at the beach or somewhere on a cruise. And you will be different after you go. You'll never be the same. Once you see this, you're going to be a different person. And one of the best things we can do is go. Bill and Melinda Gates, that have put so much money recently into healthcare in Africa, they went on a safari to Madagascar, and they were looking for the animals, and they saw the people. And he said, my goodness, look at the struggling that people are going through. I've got an extra $1 billion here. Maybe I can help out. And they have changed much of the face of healthcare and health work going on in Africa today by their investment. And I look at that and I say, they're doing the right thing, and Africa is saving our souls by getting engaged and them getting engaged in this particular area. And now they got Warren Buffett giving $37 billion or something like that for the cause. So just go. There are lots of different groups that are over there. There are a lot of different groups doing food work or malaria distribution work. But go and see it, because you'll never be the same. I remember one night going with Frank Wolf to Darfur. He's a congressman from Virginia, a wonderful gentleman. He's been one of the lead human rights activists for some period of time. We were in Darfur and early on in the conflict and interviewing people that were at a refugee camp. And there's probably 30,000, 40,000 people in this refugee camp that had just sprung up overnight. And huge questions about, is there going to be a dysentery problem? Or we're going to have cholera outbreaks? What issues are going to come up? And yet the most basic and mundane ones are the ones that people would talk about. Within that camp, the women were having to go out and gather firewood to make an evening meal, because if the men went out, there were Janjaweed, the militias just circling the camp, and they'd kill the men. Now, they may well likely rape the women, but in the overall scheme of things, I guess that's the way we'll go. And they were having to travel out further and further from the refugee camp every night just to get firewood to be able to build their fires to cook a meal. And you just think about that when I go in my backyard and I'm picking up sticks if they get blown down by the wind, and I'm thinking, there are people in the world in places that risk their life just to do what I'm kind of throwing off over the fence. And it sears your mind. And you're going, I can do something about this. Or you think I thought first, well, somebody ought to do something about it. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm a U.S. Senator. I can do something about it. But the truth of the matter is you can too. And anybody in this country that's willing to get organized and get active on it can do something on this. The Save Darfur Coalition, primarily started by a bunch of college students, and is really having an impact. These divestiture campaigns, we've got a number of states that have now divested of funds being invested in Sudan. And it's been a group of activists that have gotten involved in a college campus and spread this. And they're really making a difference. Or the group that's highlighted the invisible children and the night commuters in northern Uganda that have been part of being run out of the area by the Lord's Resistance Army group in northern Uganda that's been involved in that area. There was 3 guys that were in college, went over with a video camera and started making a video about these kids commuting at night into town 3 to 5 miles so that they wouldn't get taken from their homes and made into child soldiers. And then they got 150 cities across this country of kids, young people, to do a night commute just to experience what's it like to commute into town, walking, to sleep in a parking garage so that you'd be safe. And they're starting to change policy by doing this. And this is just a couple of guys here with a video camera. So go and do it. Be safe about it. As a parent of 5 children, I want you to be safe. But go, and you'll be different. And it'll be a great thing for you. And it'll be a great thing for the United States if you do that. We need to do that more ourselves. And then figure out ways that we can get involved. I want to talk about a couple of ways that I think we can get and that you can get involved here. In some cases, it may be working with groups on microloans, putting those together to build economic activity. There are groups I've seen build up compassionate investment portfolios, trying to figure best ways that they could invest because we need to grow economically and work with them on an economic basis. I want to see us do a lot more on neglected diseases in Africa. I've worked in the Congress on getting more AIDS funding for retroviral drugs into Africa, and now we've got a number of people that are being, they're alive, that they would be dead otherwise if we weren't providing and supporting those drugs. We need to raise private funds as well to do that. I think Bono's groups raised something like nearly $30 million for antiretrovirals. But we need to do it on other things, like in malaria. 60% of the children in sub-Saharan Africa have malaria. 60%. You know, and we need to do better of distributing bed nets and here, and some people find this controversial, but I think they need to be able to spray the walls of their huts with a DDT to be able to kill mosquitoes and to keep them from biting people as well, to get that malaria rate down. And we're starting to see some successes on malaria in some of these countries. But we need to do more than that. Do you know in this country, or in this world, 90% of the research dollars on medical pharmaceutical products go for 10% of the diseases. 90% of the research dollars for 10% of the diseases. And they're diseases that you and I get. They're diseases that are in big economic countries so that the pharmaceutical companies can find a way to be able to invest the money to be able to get the return on investment that they need to have. But that means that 90% of the diseases get only 10% of the research. And they're in places of poorer countries. Of people that don't have much economic activity. It's things like river blindness or sleeping sickness, malaria for as far as research. We need to do more. So we got a bill through here a couple of weeks ago to allow drug companies to jump in line ahead of other products instead of waiting 18 months for approval before you can start the approval process, waiting only 6 months if they'll develop a cure for one of these neglected diseases. And they think by speeding up their approval process or jumping in line a year ahead of time, that may be worth for some big blockbuster drugs as much as $300 million. And they can use that to invest then in, well, what can we do of developing one of these drug products for these neglected diseases? So using our marketplace to try to develop more drug products in this neglected disease area where only 10% of the research is going for 90% of the diseases. That's what I mean about innovative solutions and using our economy and our work and our goodness to make these sort of things happen. We can do more of it. We need to do more of it. We need to do a lot in the area of trade and investing. And then I want to conclude on these couple of points. I think we've got to change our policies as well. I think the Millennium Challenge account has been a good policy perspective way to go. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. But in that one, we require countries to hit certain changes in their own system before we will put up funds for their use as they choose and they see fit. I think that's a good way for us to go for as far as trying to change systems to be less corruption involved, more likely for there to be success, property rights involved. I think that's a good route for us to go. On our Agency for International Development funding, I think we're much too scattershot on this. Right now, AID funding, when it goes into place, and like in Congo, they had, when I was asked there a couple years ago, they had 10 pages of different products and projects that they were doing. It was soup to nuts. I think we need to take that money and narrow it into fewer areas and major on the majors. Water, food, agriculture, medicine, education. I'd like to see us take half of our AID funding and put it into one of those 4 areas in key development countries so that we're majoring on the majors and getting these right. We're not putting near enough money into clean water projects or in food projects or in medicine or in education. I think these are key ways that we can change our policies to be able to help on the ground. I think we need to engage on trade issues as well, and in a much more aggressive fashion. I'm very hopeful for this moment on Africa. We're seeing change happening in a radical fashion, in a positive way. There are difficult spots, there's no question about it in Africa, but you're seeing a lot of very positive signs coming on forward. Over the last 10 years, the number of conflicts in Africa have dropped from 17 to 5. In 1989, Africa had only 3 democratically elected governments. By 2005, it was 18. 20 African economies are growing at more than a 5% rate per year. 17 of those are non-oil-based economies. So you're seeing some real things happening on a very positive basis in Africa. And now's the African moment. I think it's critical that we do that. This will help them, and it will increase our security. The gentleman pointed out to me some time ago, and I think it's a truism, that if you look on a map of the world and places engaged in the global economy, the number of terrorists that come out of those countries is less. Not non-existent, because clearly terrorism still comes out, and terrorists still come out of those countries. But a lot more, on a percentage basis, comes out of places that are not connected to the global economy. We're seeing nothing to lose by disrupting this system. What if we engage people? What if their lives start improving? What if they are engaged in the global economy and us working with people? This is going to help in the long-term security system. It's going to be helping the long-term security setup in the region. Plus, America is greatest when she is good. America is great because she is good. If we lose our goodness, and here I'm talking about doing things from the heart that are right, if we lose our goodness, we'll surely lose our greatness. This plays to America's fundamental goodness. Now, we have gotten many things wrong. There's no doubt about it. But this one, if we can do this right, and if we can do it good and good from the heart, that we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, it will continue and will support American greatness. If we do it out of selfish interest, I don't think it moves nearly as much. And now is the moment for us to do this. I appreciate very much your interest and attention, and I look forward to a question and answer. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Senator Brownback has agreed to take some questions. Before we entertain a question from Boston, we are also doing a live video feed to Morehouse. And so we had agreed that the first question would come from one of the students at Morehouse. Morehouse.
Hi guys, how you doing in Morehouse?
How you doing?
There we go. Now we got some reaction here. I like this real-time stuff.
Your question, please.
Yes, how you doing? I'm Mark Robinson. I'm a I'm a senior business marketing major at Morehouse College. My question is, how can the U.S. bring more attention to security issues and the state of affairs in Africa? And the second part to that question is, will you take any steps towards improving the state of affairs in Africa?
The question is how we can improve the security situation in Africa and what steps that I would take in seeing that situation in our relationship improve. Yes, we can improve the security situation in Africa, but I think it's not as simple as just saying, okay, we're going to put a series of military bases there. I don't think that's the way it acts out, or I don't think it's the way it performs. I'm not opposed to that. We had a vibrant discussion ahead of time, but I don't think that's the way that you improve this security situation. I think it's much more organic, and you have to do this by us being more engaged on economic, on humanitarian, on social issues in Africa. For instance, I talked about us dealing with neglected diseases more. On food aid programs, the McGovern-Dole or the Dole-McGovern program, whether you're Republican or Democrat-Republican, is a program that gives food aid to classrooms and to students. It gives them a school lunch if they'll go up to school. So it gives them a lunch and gives them an education and draws them into school. That's a way that we can move forward in helping out with education. I think we've got to do a lot more on water well drilling and in food and agricultural efforts. These, I think, are the ways really for us to improve the security situation in Africa as people see their lives improve, that they're less willing to engage in terroristic activity. I think that's key for us to do, along with long-term investment and engagement in their broader economy, whether it's agriculture or minerals, oil and gas, I think would be a key for us to do. And that is something I will do. But one of the key things we've got to do as well is we've got to go there. I, as president, will go there. I'll go to Africa. I've been there once a year. Well, I've been there 4 of the last 5 years in different places in Africa. It is key that we go, and much of the time when we go, we need to listen more than we talk. We need to just hear what is it that people are saying they'd like to see and that they need for us to do. And that's what I talk about. I think we need, and we're going to see in the future, hopefully a wise and a humbler foreign policy, where we go and we step and we listen to people and we hear what they have to say in our engagement with them. Thanks, Morehouse. Thank you. How do you want to do this, Ambassador? Do you want to call on the people to...
I can or you can.
All right, let me do it. Yes, ma'am, please. If you mind standing up and shouting your question out, I'd appreciate it. I may not get you answers on everything, and if you have critique or comment, please feel free to put them on forward. We'll try to do the best we can.
Okay, thank you. You just mentioned that when we go to Africa, we have to listen. And your visits to Africa in the particular regions you have visited, when you have asked the people what do they want, what have the responses been?
One of the big ones has been dealing with malaria. And this put me on point on something that we've been able to change. They were saying on malaria, they know what to do. They just don't have the money for the drugs or the bed nets or the spray. And we were putting over 90% of our federal government money on malaria was on conferences and consultants to tell people, well, okay, here's what you ought to do. And the African leadership would say, we know what to do. We don't have any money to do it with. And so we changed that around. And we said half of this money has to go, at least half of this money has to go for things. Modern drugs, bed nets, sprays, to be able to deal with the situation. That's as a practical example. A second one that a lot of people say what we need water. Because even if you've got somebody on antiretroviral AIDS drugs, if they're not getting good food and water, their body systems are weakened and they can't fight it off, or they can't fight off a tuberculosis, or a lot of times these are in combination, that they'll have that with malaria, and that they need just basic food and clean water. That's why I talk about majoring on the majors with this. Now in some areas they're talking about a need for infrastructure, like in southern Sudan. When you go there, it doesn't have a road in the whole place. They need some connection to the outside world. And that's what I mean about listening to, okay, what is it in a particular situation that people need? In Eastern Congo, we've just got to really be in there with a heavy UN force, or I would hope an African Union presence, to just get some stability, because it hasn't been stable for some period of time. And the first need is to just get stability in some of these areas still. So it varies from place to place. Yes, sir.
Actually, my question touches on two of the points you just mentioned in your response, Senator. First of all, in regards to drugs, do you believe that the intellectual property rights of some of the major U.S. drug corporations trump the rights of the people to cheap and effective antiretroviral drugs that are coming from such countries as Argentina and even now some of the Asian drug companies? And secondly, in regards to access to water, do you believe that the water situation and the development of new water markets should be given through private companies, or should they be given as government-funded public works projects? As we see in South America, if we can use that as an example, the privatization of water, especially in Bolivia, has been a major problem. Do you think that privatization of water is the way to go in Africa, or do you think that it should be public?
Yeah, good questions, very practical questions. On the first one, and this is going to be an incomplete answer, but I do think we have to stand and protect intellectual property rights if we're going to expect development to take place of drugs. Now, what I'd like to see us do is then negotiate with companies to get access to those intellectual property rights for us to be able to use, or to be able to have the drugs then manufactured at a cheaper cost. But I think you've got to protect the intellectual property rights, because that's the basis on which the investment has first taken place. And if you don't protect that, I don't think you're going to get a long-term investment. Or what you'll see taking place in the future is companies saying, I've tried this route before and it got taken away from me, therefore I can't go to my investors or to my stockholders and say, let's invest in this. So I think you need to protect that. But I think we can be much more aggressive about negotiating for the intellectual property rights so that we can be able to distribute them. Plus, the model I talked to you about on this neglected diseases, the model I put forward to you, is very much about a market-based solution. But it's using this market to be able to get research on drugs in that market. I think that's where we have to be more willing to move and to still protect that. The water question's a good one. And personally, what I'd like to see us do is put a lot more water well drilling equipment into the hands of Africans for them to go out and drill water wells. And I could see us doing a model on cheaper equipment that doesn't go in deep boreholes. These would be fairly shallow water holes. Is that we provide the equipment in exchange for a private group in Africa drilling 100 wells for us. Then after that, you get the equipment. Then you can do what you want to, but we get 100 wells out of it, and the equipment then is located in Africa. Hopefully that they'll start some sort of water well drilling business up out of it. That's why I'm talking about trying to develop there locally the economy and the activity taking place, and not denying the private sector on it, because the private sector is a key driver in the economy. Private sector is a key driver in this economy. And I think the model will be the same there. So you want to help it, but I think you have to try to push it along. And these are ways that we've talked about and tried to do. Yes, ma'am.
Suggested we've actually started to do here in Boston. First of all, I want to thank you for participating recently in the Republican debate that took place that was hosted by Tavis Smiley. I'm glad that you showed up, so I really appreciate that. Yes.
I apologize that
and
others
secondly,
didn't.
I am part of a group of 10 African-American women here in Boston called the Kenya Sisters. We literally took a vacation 2 years ago and have now turned it into a nonprofit organization. We are going back to Kenya on November 1st. On November 10th in Mombasa, we're going to have our first international conference, co-partnering with a very socially responsible hotel in Mombasa. So there are organizations like ours, My Sister's Keeper, that's doing a lot of work in the Sudan, that are actually involved in not only humanitarian efforts, but also economic development. My question to you is, as China is racing ahead to really invest in Africa, what can be done here in the United States to, first of all, educate our people about the advantages of partnering and working in Africa from a partnership perspective, similar to the advantages that are being taken advantage of in China?
Good practical question. First, let me thank you for living the impact trip out. I'm delighted to hear that you guys are doing that, and that's been my experience where I've seen people is once they go, then they know I've got to do something, and I can do something, and that's why I just go, please. One of the things we've been pushing, we have not gotten done through AID, is to do a private donors conference. AID is in every country in the world. What I'd like to see them do is originate saying, okay, we work with these 20 local NGOs in Rwanda or wherever the country is, and work with a private donors conference here saying, okay, we're going to bring this to Boston. We've got 20 local NGOs in Rwanda that we work with. It's an orphanage here, it's a water well drilling group here, it's this or that. And then bring a conference to Boston saying, okay, we want local folks to connect with these individuals. Whether it's a church group or a private group or a civil group. But if AID could do the origination and the initial due diligence to identify the groups, I think there'd be a ton of American participation. But most people, it's too big of a step, or they don't know how do I even find anybody here to work with? But if somebody will originate on that, they'd be happy to work with them, and then as their group, their Lions Club or this group starts sending people over to see, well, okay, let's look at this orphanage. Yeah, we can help here. We can put money into this. And do that donors conference on a private person-to-person or small group basis instead of a government-to-government basis. I think that's something that could really help. For as far as the business investment, I think what we need to probably do is just a lot more bringing of African officials and business leaders here, and then doing the networking or taking business trips ourselves. We've done that in various countries over a number of years, where the government would facilitate a business-to-business contact. You don't make the business deal, that's up to them to do, but you help make the initial contact. We did that in the early stages of our engagement with China, where you'd have state governments would take business trips with groups of business people from the U.S. to China. Some would make deals, others wouldn't. That's a good model for us to do, particularly on a state-by-state basis with Africa now. And it'll work, and it has in the past. Yes, sir. How are you? Wait, you get the microphone to you. I think I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
I said, my name is Ronnie Mayanja. I'm a student here at Boston University Graduate School at the College of Communication, originally from Uganda. And I had a couple of questions, actually two of them. One,
I got sick in your country. Boy, I love Uganda. It's a great place, and Kampala is wonderful. But man, I went down.
Thank you so much.
You're right. That was not a very good advertisement, was it, for doing that? But come to Kansas sometime if you want.
It happens to be in the tropics, so probably. Was that malaria or something like that?
I was on malaria drugs, and I think that's what really actually took me, was my system just didn't handle the malaria drugs as well as...
I'm very sorry to hear
But
that.
I lost weight, so, there's kind of...
Well, let me get on to the questions.
I'm sorry. This isn't Leno, is it? Okay.
I have two questions. One, I wanted to get to know your position regarding the proposed AFRICOM command, basically, that the Bush administration is planning to set up on the continent, because there is a general belief that that's basically kind of instituted to try to control Africa's resources. I wanted to get your kind of take on that. That is regarding AFRICOM. And then the second question, as an African basically who has lived here and basically come to school here, there's a perception that we feel the media here portrays Africa in a very negative light. I wanted to get your position again. What can be done? Because according to some of the research that I've been able to carry out, you'll find that right now, again, talking to some people, because I've been doing an internship at CNN, at the CNN Center in Atlanta, but I was able to find out that they will look for sort of celebrity hooks to be able to report on Africa. So what do you have to say regarding, the negative portrayal of things like war, famine, and disease, and what can be done to improve the image? Thank you so much, and I'm Ronnie Mayanja from Uganda. Thank you.
Yeah. On the first one, the ambassador and I had some discussion about that. I've generally been positive disposed towards engagement of U.S. military in Africa at the hosting and at the support from African governments. But that's something, it has to be based upon that. It has to be invited, and it has to be desired by African countries and African governments and reputable governments that are there. And I think that can help in the stabilizing in some areas and the long-term investment and growth. Capital and investment capital, one guy was saying to me at a point in time, is a coward. It goes only where it's safe. And there are some places that if you had a security umbrella, a security apparatus over it, that would invite and get more investment involved. Witness a number of countries in the former Soviet Union that are Eastern European countries, and their rapid desire to get in as part of NATO. And they did that. I mean, they wanted to be in NATO, but also a big piece of it was investment. That they wanted people to be able to say, well, this is a secure place for people to invest so that we can grow our economic activity and so that our people's lives can improve. And that's what I would see it as in Africa. Now, again, on this notion of listening, I think this is something we need to listen about. I've been involved in Darfur, and I pushed all along that we have an African Union or a UN troop presence and not a U.S. presence in Darfur. A number of people said, well, we ought to have U.S. troops involved in it. And yet I would be hopeful that we could have African Union and the UN step up. It hasn't taken place sufficiently. And I'm starting to get very impatient about this because people's lives are being lost because we haven't been able to get stability in that region. What if you had a U.S. military presence around? Now, we're stretched way too thin at this point in time to contemplate much of anything. But I think there can be some positives to this. I do believe we need to listen and have to be invited by reputable governments to participate, and it has to be in their interest and in ours. Yes, ma'am. Please stand up. Yeah.
I'm originally from Hong Kong, but I'm a student here at Boston University.
Oh, hey, hold on just a second. The last part of what you said was about negative appearances. Let me finish that because I didn't, and that's a good point. And I'll come right back to you on it. Yeah, I agree with you that it's always seen as negative. I'd like to see again some of these business trips start back and forth where people would be looking at business opportunities and that be showcased, and that if people can work at those efforts, and it's probably going to be governments in places like Uganda, bringing them to trips here, going to CNN with saying, okay, we have this set of business opportunities in Uganda, that you got to work at it, because otherwise the portrayal is going to be more celebrity-based. I can tell you I got a lot more cameras and interest on the work I was working on in Darfur when there was a certain celebrity that showed up in the room than when it was just myself and Frank Wolf. When George Clooney showed up, there was a lot more interest. I also rose in standing in Kansans amongst Kansas women when they saw me next to him. I was, not that I looked good, but they just thought if I could be associated there, that looks nice. I know what you mean. Ma'am.
So, thank you very much for your lecture. But going back to it, you said that the U.S. should perhaps increase the amount of medicine to African countries in Africa. But, however, one must acknowledge that corruption is rife in Africa, in many of the countries there. So, how do we know and how can we ensure that we can get the medicine to the sick people and not have it go to, for example, gangs or corrupt officials?
Yeah. It is a problem, and it's a problem you can see in different places. But I think key is the distribution network. I'd like to see us distribute through NGOs, reputable NGOs, either that we've worked with on the ground there from that country or international NGOs. There are governments that we can work with, too, that are reputable governments. I think that's a piece of the Millennium Challenge account that I talked about, was to put the government itself through certain measurables on corruption issues to see that our assistance goes to people and not into corrupt officials' pockets. I'm convinced the American public will support what takes place in Africa and assistance if they're convinced the money and the facilities and what's needed actually get to the people and they don't go into some dictator's pocket. That's what poisons the well in this. For instance, if you talk about aid assistance to Africa and we show the number of people getting antiretroviral drugs, the American public supports that. If you talk about, let's send a blanket amount of money to each African government, people are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I will not be a part of that, because that's just money that's going to go down somebody's pocket. So you have to design different models and see that you produce a result at the end of it. If you're going to put this much money into water well drilling, that we show this number of water wells that have been drilled and this many people that are getting clean water. That's the key, is you have to have measurables on these at the end of the day, and that's what we're starting to do with more of these programs, and I think it's paramount.
Senator, we're going to take a couple of more questions. Okay. Let's go back to Morehouse.
All right.
To take another question from them, and then we'll entertain a last question here in Boston
All right.
University.
Morehouse, you're on.
Good evening.
Evening.
All right.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you great.
Okay. My name is Jeremy Cormier, graduating senior business management major. One question, how would your Christian background play to relations with African countries, of which many northern states have large Muslim populations?
Good question, and I think it would play very well. My experience has been, hi guys. I just wanted to see how much the time delay is on this, but I think it would play. I think it'll play very well, because these are people of faith, and I think they understand faith. And they may be a different faith perspective, but I think they do appreciate and understand faith. And to understand people that believe a set of values. And yes, I am a Christian. I hope to live that faith in a positive way, in a very loving way, because if that faith lived well is a life of love, and it's a life caring for others, and it's a selfless life. And I get it wrong a lot. But I hope that if I could model and live that, that it would be something that would actually resonate quite well within an Islamic country that's a country that's well built around faith and respect for faith. And I would hope we could do that. Thanks for the question. Yeah, let's go here.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Senator Brownback, thank you for coming to Boston. Thank you for coming to BU. Thank you for your involvement in Darfur. But my question to you is, I'm 40 now, and in my lifetime I've seen Rwanda, I've seen Bosnia, and Darfur. Based on who we are in this country, have we failed Darfur? And now, what will we do it now? Because we have the ability, and we are still sleeping on it.
Good. I want to answer this yes and no. from the standpoint of there's been a book written on the handling of genocides in the past by the world. And the world has been pretty good about declaring genocides after they happen, and has been pretty bad about dealing with them while they happen. As a matter of fact, up until Darfur, it was always, well, okay, we identified it some years later, and then we would say never again. Then when Rwanda happened, we said never again, and I think we really meant it at that point in time. But then it became difficult to say, well, how do you deal with this if it's an inside one country proposition, where you have to get either permission of that country or invade that country to deal with it? And then Darfur, which Darfur is the second genocide in Sudan. There's been a genocide in the south where there have been 2 million killed over a long-running period. And thankfully, we've got a peace agreement. It's phrased many times in the South, but has really improved the situation. So I think it's been positive that we declared this as a genocide while it was happening, and that we got African Union and we got African Union troops in while it was happening, and we slowed it down. But we haven't effectively dealt with it. In past times, we would have just either said we don't know what's going on, or we really don't want to know what's going on, or we're not capable of dealing with it because it's inside one country. This one we've actually tried to deal with. And the international community has actually tried to deal with and has had a little bit of success on slowing it down. But it's nowhere near the response that we need. And you've still got people that have been killed and that are dying even today of what's taking place. And then some of the activity gets ratcheted up. And so it's been an unsatisfactory response, but it's been better than we've done in the past, at least in identifying it and trying to act on it in an early phase. I do want to say, again, get involved in these things, and a lot of young people have been, to help that out, to keep that agenda item up and on the agenda, and showcasing that around the world. You've been very generous with your time. And I want to say just in conclusion, this is a key issue of our day. This is an important foreign policy issue. I'm out on the campaign trail all the time, and they did a poll 6 months ago, and already 2/3 of the American public 6 months ago was tired of the 2008 presidential cycle. That was 6 months ago. But I find people will talk with you all day long about issues. I mean, if you'll sit down, okay, what are we going to do in Iraq? People will talk with you all day long about that. Or on Africa, what are we going to do on Africa? And hear this great group that's here tonight, listening and talking and engaging on a very important topic. And I just want to urge you to continue to do that, and don't just get brought into the soundbite political culture of saying, okay, it's got to be in 30 seconds or less, or it's got to be on a bumper sticker. But really dig into it and dedicate your life to it. This would be a great place to dedicate your life to a topic that's in play that you can help shape with your life. There's a lot of other things you could do, but this would be a really good one. And get into it then, and really dig into it, and get involved in the policy process. And support somebody that's working on it, whether it's Republican or Democrat, independent, whatever the case might be. You're not going to agree with that person 100% of the time. Let me assure you of that. There are no angels involved in politics. Now, there are people trying to move there, but that people get it wrong. But find somebody that you can back and some place that you can get involved, and then just do it. Because that's what we need. We need your energy, we need your legs, and we're at the moment that this can happen. Thanks for inviting me. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to add my voice to Senator Brownback's. Thank those of you who've gathered here at Boston University. I'd like to also thank our friends at Morehouse College, who are a permanent part of our collaborative around African issues. Thank you. That's for you, Morehouse. This evening's thank you, Morehouse. This evening's lecture series was the beginning of what we hope to be an ongoing discussion during this presidential season. And as I said to Senator Brownback before we came out, I very much appreciated his willingness to kick this series off. There's been much discussion about the need to deal with American national security interest. And the debate tends to focus around Iraq. Should we be there or should we not? But there seems to be as well a universality of opinion that American national security interest can only be protected if we have a broader agenda than that. Unfortunately, we've not heard much about the broader agenda. Tonight, we did. So, Senator Brownback, we thank you for elevating the conversation, if you will, about U.S. security interests as it relates to the continent of Africa. Again, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Be careful. Godspeed.